Welcome to our channel where we explore Nigeria's history and the complex and often contentious issues that shape our world. Today, we are tackling a question that sparks intense debates among Nigerians and Africa watchers alike. Was Nigeria better under military rule? Nigeria's history has been marked by periods of military rule which have had a profound impact on the country's development. From the early days of independence to the present, Nigerians have grappled with the legacy of military rule and its effects on the country's economy, politics, and society. In this video, we will take a closer look at Nigeria's experience under military rule, from the coup that overthrew the First Republic in 1966 to the transition to democracy in 1999. We will examine the economic, social, and political impacts of military rule and ask the question: was Nigeria better off under military rule? Join us as we explore these complex and contentious issues. Share your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. Nigeria's economic performance under military rule is a complex and multifaceted topic. On one hand, the military regime's authoritarian nature allowed for swift decision-making and implementation of policies. On the other hand, the lack of transparency, accountability, and democratic participation often led to misguided policies and rampant corruption. Let's take a look at Nigeria's GDP growth rates during the military era. As you can see, the country experienced rapid economic growth during the 1970s, driven largely by the oil boom. However, this growth was not sustainable and the economy began to decline in the 1980s. The oil boom of the 1970s brought unprecedented wealth to Nigeria, but it also created a culture of dependence on a single commodity. The military regime's failure to diversify the economy and invest in other sectors meant that the country was ill prepared for the oil price shocks of the 1980s. Another key indicator of economic performance is inflation. As you can see, Nigeria's inflation rate was relatively low during the 1970s, but it began to rise sharply in the 1980s. This was largely due to the government's reliance on monetary policies to finance its spending, which led to a surge in money supply and inflation. The economic mismanagement of the military era had a devastating impact on the lives of ordinary Nigerians. The country experienced widespread poverty, unemployment, and inflation, which eroded the purchasing power of citizens and reduced their standard of living. Security and stability are essential components of any functioning state. During Nigeria's military era, the regime's authoritarian nature came at a steep cost to individual freedoms, human rights, and the rule of law. Let's take a look at some of the key security challenges Nigeria faced during the military era. The country experienced several coups, counter-coups, and ethnic conflicts, which threatened its very existence. The military regime's response to these challenges was often heavy-handed, resulting in human rights abuses and further destabilization. One of the most devastating conflicts during this period was the Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafran War. We made a video earlier on the history of the Biafran War. You will find a link of the video in the description section. The war resulted in the deaths of over 1 million people and had a profound impact on Nigeria's security and stability. The military regime's handling of the conflict was widely criticized, and the war remains a sensitive topic in Nigeria to this day. Another critical aspect of security and stability is the protection of human rights. Unfortunately, Nigeria's military regime had a poor human rights record, with widespread reports of arbitrary arrests, detention, and torture. The regime's suppression of free speech, assembly, and the press also undermined Nigeria's democratic institutions and the rule of law. Despite the challenges and human rights abuses, Nigerians continue to resist military rule and demand democratic reforms. The pro-democratic movement, which emerged in the 1980s, played a critical role in Nigeria's transition to democracy in 1999. Governance and accountability are the cornerstones of any functioning democracy. Let's take a look at some of the key governance challenges Nigeria faced during the military era. One of the most notorious examples of governance failure during this period was the regime of General Sani Abacha.
Consequently, the following decisions come into immediate effect. The interim national government is hereby dissolved. The national and state assemblies are also dissolved. The state executive councils are dissolved. The brigade commanders are to take over from the governors in their states until administrators are appointed. Where there are no brigade commanders, the commissioners of police in the states are to take over. All local governments stand dissolved. The directors of personnel are to take over the administration of the local governments until administrators are appointed. The National Electoral Commission is hereby dissolved. All former secretaries to federal ministries are to hand over to their director generals until ministers are appointed. The two political parties are hereby dissolved. All processions, political meetings, and associations of any type in any part of the country are hereby banned. Any consultative committee, by whatever name called, is hereby proscribed. Decree 61 of 1993 is hereby abrogated.
Abacha's rule was marked by widespread human rights abuses, corruption, and mismanagement of the economy. The regime's lack of transparency and accountability also meant that Nigeria's wealth was squandered on grandiose projects and personal enrichment. Corruption was a major challenge during Nigeria's military era. The regime's lack of transparency and accountability created an environment in which corruption could thrive. The mismanagement of Nigeria's oil wealth, the lack of accountability in government contracting, and the embezzlement of public funds were just a few examples of the corruption that characterized military rule.
We have decided to free Nigeria.
Social services and welfare are essential components of any functioning society. However, during Nigeria's military era, these critical sectors were often neglected or underfunded. Despite the country's oil wealth, the education sector was woefully underfunded. Classrooms were overcrowded, teachers were underpaid, and educational materials were scarce. The result was a generation of Nigerians who lacked access to quality education and were ill prepared for the challenges of the modern economy. Nigeria's healthcare section was also severely neglected during the military era. Hospitals lacked basic medical supplies, equipment was outdated, and the healthcare professionals were underpaid and overworked. The result was a healthcare system that was unable to provide even basic care to many Nigerians. Poverty was another major challenge during Nigeria's military era. Despite the country's oil wealth, many Nigerians lived in abject poverty. The lack of access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities meant that many Nigerians were trapped in a circle of poverty that was difficult to escape. As we conclude our examination of Nigeria's experience under military rule, it's clear that the legacy of this period continues to shape the country's development trajectory today. While Nigeria has made significant progress in consolidating its democracy and promoting economic growth, the country still grapples with many of the same challenges that characterized the military era, from corruption and insecurity to poverty and inequality. Nigeria's development challenges are complex and multifaceted. However, by understanding the historical context of these challenges, we can better appreciate the need for sustained efforts to address them. As we look to the future, it's clear that Nigeria has the potential to become a beacon of hope and prosperity for the African continent. However, realizing this potential will require a collective effort from all Nigerians to build a more just, equitable, and prosperous society. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos on questions surrounding Nigeria history, culture, and identity.